Hi, my name's Yasmin.
And I'm Matt, and welcome to another episode of Life's Hard, What's Next?
So today we want to talk about something called the four tendencies. Matt, why do we want to talk about it?
So it's a bit different from what we normally talk about, but we both think it's probably quite a good thing to go over. Now, this is more a concept rather than a specific issue,
Mm,
but we feel that understanding this helps you interact with people, with relationships in the family, with colleagues, with,
hmm
basically anything that involves a person.
Yeah, like we found it really helpful to understand ourselves and each other and other relationships we have based on understanding the tendencies. So, what I'll do is I'll give you a quick rundown of what the four tendencies are, but we will leave links for where you can do the quiz and also links to Gretchen Rubin, who is a writer and podcaster who has a podcast where she talks about this a lot, but also has published a book about it and has lots of resources on her website. So, don't feel like you have to write any of this down because all of this is on Gretchen's website and we'll put all the links up.
You might even be able to pick out what you are just straight from the definitions or how Yaz explains it.
Definitely. When I heard this description and how I'm going to describe it is basically how Gretchen Rubin describes it, I immediately knew what my tendency was. But basically, the four tendencies describe how people respond to expectation, both inner expectation and outer expectation.
So what is the expectation?
So expectation is when there is a demand made of you, right? When someone is wanting something from you or when you're wanting something from yourself.
Okay.
And Gretchen just puts these people, or puts people, I should say, into four categories. The first category is an upholder who responds to both inner expectation and outer expectation. I'm an upholder, and a good example is that an upholder is able to go to the gym because they've decided they want to go to the gym, so they are responding to that inner expectation they put on themselves, but they're also really good at meeting a work deadline.
Yep.
The second group is questioners. Now,
That's me.
yeah, Matt's a questioner. And questioners are good at meeting their inner expectations, but they're not very good at meeting their outer expectations. And the reason Gretchen has called them questioners is because they question things to make it an inner expectation. So questioners will often want to understand why you want something from them before they'll do it so that they can turn it into an inner expectation.
Or like something like if a process is changing,
Mm-hmm.
why?
Yep, 100%. So questioners like data, they like research, they like information, and they don't like things being arbitrary. So questioners will often say, well, why should I, start my new resolution on, or my new habit on New Year's Day? That's an arbitrary
Yeah.
date. Or why celebrate Valentine's Day on Valentine's Day?
Or a more practical thing. Why should I do what you tell me to do
Mm-hmm.
when you're just when your excuse is just because?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just because it's not good enough for a
No.
questioner. No.
You'll get a lot of pushback.
Definitely. The third category are obligers. Now, obligers are very good at following outer expectation, but not inner expectation. So, for example, if someone's depending on them as a gym buddy, they'll go to the gym. But if it's just because they want to go to the gym, they're pretty unlikely to go to the gym unless there's some outer accountability involved.
So you need like a buddy with you essentially, or promising something to someone else to do it.
100%, yeah. And again, like Gretchen's done so many episodes about this, but sometimes that outer expectation can come from your future self, right? Or from a pet. So it doesn't have to be another person, but you do need outer accountability. You're not going to do something just because you want to do it. That's not really enough. And I should add that obligers are the biggest group. And I mean, I like how Gretchen describes this, and we'll kind of come back to this, but she says it's not about one tendency being better than the other, because obligers will often hear this and go, oh God, I've got the worst tendency.
Yeah.
But it's about working with your tendency. And if everybody was an upholder or a questioner or a rebel, which is the last one we're going to come to in a second, then of course society wouldn't run.
Yeah, exactly. You
So
kind of need a look. Like obligers are probably more your common workers and those kind of things, right? You'd probably say.
100%. Yeah, I mean, Gretchen says that obligers in some ways are the backbone of society. Like, if we didn't have obligers, then society wouldn't function very well.
Nothing will get done.
No, nothing would get done. And then the last category are rebels. So rebels don't respond to inner expectation and they don't respond to outer expectation. They do things when they want to because they feel like it. But if someone tries to tell them to do something, even if they were thinking of doing it before, they're much less likely to do it if someone tells them. We all know people like that.
So going to that, just because it probably sounds a bit confusing, the not responding to outer and not responding to inner expectations.
Mm.
So how do they decide that that's what they're going to do? Rebels.
Rebels. Again, from what Gretchen describes it, like, I mean, I'm not a rebel and neither are you, so we can't
But
speak
we
on,
but we know some.
but we definitely know some rebels. They have to make things either fun, they like it when things are fun, or a game, or the bigger thing is they have to kind of understand why it fits into their values and the kind of person they want to be. So, for example, a rebel might quit smoking because they think to themselves, I don't want to give all of my money to these corporations, and it's a value to me to be healthy. It's a value to me to live long enough to see my kids get married or whatever. And that's their reasoning for quitting smoking. Whereas on the flip side, an upholder would just say, I need to quit smoking. And they would quit smoking.
It's like what you're talking about with your eating disorder back in the day, in that episode.
The
It's
first
like
one, yeah.
flicking a switch.
Yeah, that's how, well, at least for me in my upholder brain, that's how things work. If I decide I'm going to do something with enough conviction, I can just do it. Whereas, yeah, the different tendencies need to do different things. And that's, I think, where both of us have found this really helpful, because for a long time in our relationship, and even sometimes now, we don't really understand why the other person behaves a certain way. But when you know why other people behave a certain way, you're not going to take it personally. And then also when you understand why you behave a certain way, then you're going to be able to understand yourself more and be able to achieve the things you want to achieve. It makes life easier to know what your tendency is.
Now, another thing that just with the rebels quickly, because they don't like working without a expectation, you'll generally find that a lot of rebels generally go out on their own, don't they, in their work situation. They don't like working for a boss. They don't like being told what to do. So they generally like to, do their own company, start their own jobs, those kind of things.
100% be their own bosses. And just to kind of give you an idea as well, so I've already said that obligers are the biggest tendency from the data that Gretchen has collected, and like millions of people have done her quiz. Obligers are the biggest category. I think questioners are the second, then upholders, and rebels are the smallest category of people. Yeah. But yeah, it is really interesting. So do you want to give them some examples of situations that we've run into as a couple where our tendencies have kind of come up?
Do you want me to talk about you or me?
Either or.
I'll talk about both. But I'll start off with you. So with Yas being an upholder, she doesn't like change.
Nope.
So in our kitchen we have a list of food that we're going to have for dinners, right?
Yeah. We to be clear, we make this list so we know what to buy from the grocery store. Yep.
But to Yas, it's kind of, a lot of the time it's hard set. Like, once it's on the list, we're having it through the week. If I suggest after work, like we've been having a long day or something, like, oh, how about we just go and get takeout? No, it's on the list.
Yeah, definitely.
What about for me?
And I mean, I should say that I've improved.
Oh, I've
definitely
improved
a lot. But like, yeah, for me, if we say we're going to do something, or if a plan is set, asking me to change that plan is incredibly uncomfortable for me. I don't like it.
Yeah, so with our list now, we just incorporate like one takeout night on there. So it doesn't matter what day we have it, but as long as we have it within that week, it's fine.
And we are reasonably flexible about what we eat per night. It's more about, these are the options for the week. Let's make sure we have all the ingredients in the kitchen to make those options. The days that we eat things aren't set in stone. But yeah, I definitely, if that morning I'm like, right, we're going to have nachos for dinner, and someone changes the menu, it's not comfortable for me. Yeah.
One of the fun things about being a questioner is, we're talking about this before, is that you can kind of get decision paralysis. What would you call it?
Gretchen calls it analysis paralysis. Yeah, analysis paralysis. Yep.
So we're kind of talking about it, and we're using the gym as an example, right? I can have statistics to say I should go, then I've got statistics to say I don't go, and then just don't do any, just don't do it in the end. So that's kind of one of the downsides of being a questioner, isn't it? But then the positive is that if a process has changed, and there's an actual, like at work, if a process changes and there's logical reason behind it, it's really easy for me just to follow it and say, yep, this is what I'm doing. Or like with my study, when I decided that I'm going to go back and study again, I essentially came around and said to myself, I was like, I need something more flexible. I need something less people heavy because I
Mm.
found just as an introvert, just exhausting.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so one of us needs a flexible job, so that's essentially how we came to that conclusion. So the statistics and what was saying around me was like, okay, yeah, we need a change.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. You're good at making an informed decision once you have the
That
information
information.
that you need and the data that you need, which is a positive.
I actually remember someone talking to a rebel once, and they just kept talking, and they didn't like me because I would wait until they finished talking, and he specifically said, "Why don't you butt in and talk?"
Yeah.
Talk. I'm like, well, I'm waiting for you to give me all the information before I tell you my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. He was the kind of person who would kind of like talk to you, but also kind of spin you around in a circle as he was talking to you. So he wanted you to kind of react.
Yeah.
He wanted you to get fired up.
Yeah.
And he didn't like it when people didn't. And that's one of the things that he actually found quite hard about you, is that you didn't give him a response.
Yeah.
You calmly waited for all the information before you had an emotional response about it, or before you commented or responded.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other thing is how do we talk about the other tendencies? Because this is from us. So what about the obligers and the rebels?
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely would say my mum's an obliger.
Mhm.
You'd probably say your mum's an obliger
Yep.
too, right?
Yep.
I'd say my sister is an obliger. So we definitely know people of the other tendencies. And like we said, obligers are the biggest tendency group. Obligers are a really interesting one for me. I know as an upholder, and this is, I guess, the point of this, right? This is why it's helpful to know this. I remember thinking, people say they don't want to go to the, sorry, people say they want to go to the gym, and then they don't go to the gym. I don't get it. If you want to go to the gym, you just go to the gym. Like, that's how my brain works, because that's how it works in my head as an upholder. I say I'm going to do something, and then I do it. Most of the time, not all the time.
Whereas me, because we have this from time to time, whereas myself, I'll be like, it's wet, it's cold, it's been a really rough day, we still have to go home, we still have to cook dinner, we still got to go and walk Ted. Like,
yes.
It's like the stat, like in my mind, it's like, no, we should skip the gym and go home and do the essentials.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess this is where, again, it's helpful to know your tendency, because as an upholder, I didn't have a lot of empathy or sympathy for people who are like, oh, I really want to get back into exercise, and then they don't get back into exercise. And understanding that actually most people's brains don't think the way my brain does, and that a lot of people, especially obligers and questioners to a point, and rebels, it's a lot harder for them to convince themselves to do something, was actually really helpful. But the major thing with obligers is, yeah, they need accountability. So they need...
I was going to say, I'm just thinking about it, the amount of times my mum says she wants to do something and doesn't do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's got to do it by herself.
And it's not, like, again, I've already alluded to this, Gretchen says this all the time, like, I think obligers are probably the group that has the tendency to kind of beat on themselves a little bit for their tendency, but it's really hard to change your tendency from what, I mean, Gretchen understands about it.
I think it's more hardwiring, right?
Yeah, like, it's just kind of the way, you probably could, but it's not easy, especially if you're kind of on the brink of two tendencies. You probably could steer yourself in one direction or the other, but equally so, you could just learn to work with the way your brain likes to work, and that would probably be easier. So, I mean, some obligers she has interviewed or has talked to will use their future self as their accountability.
Okay.
So they'll say, okay, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, because when I'm 70 or 80, I want to be able to get in and out of a chair easily. And that's their accountability. Or they'll get a pet, especially a dog, if they want to exercise more, right? And a dog is the ultimate accountability partner for exercise, because they love going for walks.
Well, you have to walk them, otherwise
every day.
Otherwise they get too heavy.
Yeah, you really do. Like, it's one of the things about having a dog. Like, unless you're willing to pay to put them into daycare where they get a lot of exercise, you really do need to be walking them, fairly frequently, especially the bigger breeds, like the dog we have. Because if you don't, then their behavior becomes a problem and they gain weight and it's not good for them, and they love walking. Like, you take a dog to the park, it's like taking a kid to a candy store, So that's one thing that I think is good, but especially with obligers, is like, every tendency has its positives and negatives. And one of the big positives of obligers is that people can count on them, which is amazing. It's an amazing skill. But the negative is it's hard for them to do the things that they want to do. But on that same note, there are ways around them. You just kind of have to be creative about it, or like get a gym buddy or running buddy, I guess, if we're sticking to exercise as the example, because it's a good example.
Because it's a real common one that everyone sort of, you'll hear a lot of, right?
People want to do it more, but they find it hard to.
And then what about a rebel? So we've talked about the upholder, so the example of the upholder, the example of the questioner, the example of the obliger. What about the rebel?
So the rebel, if they wanted to do something like go to the gym, would, again, either want to make it a value, like, I mean, probably not that dissimilar to an obliger, like, it's valuable to me, or it's part of my values, it's important to me to be healthy and active. I want to be the kind of person who at 70, 80, 90 can run half marathons or walk 10K or whatever it is, right, that they choose.
70, 80, 90 running a half marathon, geez.
Yeah, I'm just giving random examples. But, you know, they if they tell themselves that, then they're way more likely to do it. And then the other thing, or they have to remind themselves of their values. And then the other two things are that, first of all, they have to, or it's helpful for them, I should say, to gamify it, right? So either to play in a sports team, because then there's the competitiveness aspect to it, or for them to just randomly choose what they're going to do that day for exercise instead of having a plan, instead of having it in their calendar, which is probably one of the biggest difference between rebels and the other tendencies, because the other tendencies probably would find it helpful to have something in the calendar, especially upholders. But for a rebel, if they put something in their calendar, they're probably less likely to do it. So maybe they say they're going to exercise, but they decide on the day, in the moment, do they want to go for a run? Do they want to go to the gym? Do they want to go swimming? Do they want to dance? You know, like, giving themselves that freedom is helpful.
It's important for them.
And important for them. And then the last thing that Gretchen says is that if other people want rebels to do things, so for example, the doctor wants them to exercise more, they have to give them information and consequences. So for example, exercising is good for your cardiovascular health, and if you don't exercise regularly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 happens to your cardiovascular health, consequences. And then leave it at that. It's very unhelpful for rebels for you to kind of push at them or nag at them. They don't respond to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which is really helpful if you know rebels, which we both know rebels in our lives. We have a friend who's a rebel, and my brother is a rebel. And they don't like being told what to do. And in fact, the more you try and push them to do something,
the more they'll refuse to.
Yeah, they'll rebel. So it's helpful, like the information consequences is helpful when you want to achieve something with them, but most of the time rebels are kind of best left to their own devices.
Now, just another quick thing with this. So just because you're one of these tendencies doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to have tendencies of the others, right?
Yeah.
So there is a lot of overlap with these kind of things. So I believe there's a lot of overlap with upholders and questioners.
Yep.
And then again, a lot of overlap with rebels and obligers. Is that correct?
No, questioners and upholders overlap because they both meet their inner expectations, and questioners and rebels overlap because they both don't meet outer expectation.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah, so obligers and rebels don't overlap at all.
Sorry, obligers.
Wait, do they? I'm confused now.
No,
they don't.
Talking about expectations.
Yeah, but I mean, Gretchen has a very helpful, literally Venn diagram,
because they've got because they don't meet inner expectations.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Sorry, they do. Rebels and obligers do overlap.
I thought
Sorry, it's once you see like the Venn diagram that Gretchen has on her website, it's just so easy to understand.
We'll put it up.
Yeah, I'm not very good at picturing things in my head. But yeah, there are 100% there's overlap. So I definitely have questioner tendencies in me. Definitely. Like if something doesn't make sense to me, I'm like, well, why am I doing this if it doesn't make sense to me? Oh, there you go. So upholders overlap with questioners and obligers. Questioners overlap with upholders and rebels. Rebels overlap with questioners and obligers. So the ones that don't overlap are upholders and rebels.
Yeah.
They don't overlap at all.
And
but everyone else
questioner and obligers.
And questioners and obligers. But everyone else overlaps in one level or the other, which is quite interesting.
So yeah, so I mean that's quite an interesting thing to note, just in case, you're sitting there, you're like, oh, but I have a bit of this, I have a bit of that. So there is overlap with these kind of things. I mean, I sit there sometimes and I get very stubborn I sometimes get into a upholder mindset. And then other times I'm also there and I'm like, why do I want to go to the gym? You know?
Yeah.
So it does overlap. Now, some of these tendencies have some little quirks with them, don't they?
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the one with the questioner, just because I do this a lot.
Mm.
So questioners have a fun little tendency of... So the name is questioner. We ask lots of questions.
Yes.
But if you ask me a question, it doesn't go down very well.
Questioners don't like answering questions.
So what normally happens when you ask me a question?
Usually you just don't answer. Or you shrug or
Vague.
give me a very vague answer. Yeah. And the funny thing is, so Gretchen herself is an upholder. Her husband is a questioner too.
Yep.
Right? So same as us. And she says that it used to drive her crazy.
Yep.
But now she knows to just not ask him questions because he doesn't like answering questions, But it's the great irony because questioners are going to ask everyone else questions, but they don't want to answer people's questions.
We're that annoying group of people. Isn't that what you're saying? Questions can be quite annoying.
All the tendencies have their quirks, I think.
Yep.
They all have their good things and their bad things.
Yep.
And one of the negatives of being a questioner is that sometimes people can find you frustrating,
Yep.
or confrontational, or like you're intentionally trying to rock the boat, but you're not. It's just, again, how your brain works and how you need to process things in your own brain, right?
Yeah. So that's a nice and straightforward one.
Yeah.
There is another one for obligers, and this is actually quite an interesting one. So there's a thing called an obliger rebellion. And basically what it is because the obligers have been, they do what people tell them to do, essentially. So it's very much of, they keep going, they keep going, they keep going, they keep going. Then essentially they're like, that's it.
Snap.
I've had enough.
Yep.
So what does that look like? Yes.
So I mean, Gretchen uses the example of like ending a 20-year friendship in one day, / overnight. Ending a long marriage again, essentially overnight. Quitting your job, making big drastic life moves because you've been pushed and pushed and pushed and haven't looked after yourself for so long and haven't met your expectations for so long that you just kind of snap and you have enough, because people do take advantage of obligers. That's one of the negatives of being an obliger, probably especially if you're an obliger and you're a woman, because there's a tendency for people to take advantage of women because we're kind of socialized to be people pleasing.
That is true, but we're talking about gender at the moment, right?
Yep. But yeah, so yeah, it's an interesting one. If you've ever seen 27 Dresses, it's a very old, like early 2000s movie.
How many times have you watched it?
Very good. I probably watch it once a year, to be honest. It's one of my favorite movies. But the main character has a very classic obliger rebellion. She does everything for her sister. She plans her sister, spoiler alert, she plans her sister's wedding to the man she's in love with. And then her sister goes one step too far. Her sister's being a bit of a bridezilla. Goes one step too far and cuts up their mother's wedding dress without talking to her about it. And
to make a new dress.
To make a new dress for her. She uses pieces of her mum's wedding dress to make herself a new dress without asking her older sister, and her older sister loses her beep.
Because the older sister wanted to wear the wedding dress.
Yeah. She always wanted to wear the wedding dress. She also wanted to get married. It was very important to her. Like, all the stuff that's been so important to her whole life, her sister's just taking without even trying. And yeah, she snaps, and she exposes her sister to her fiance, and to everybody, because her sister like lies about being vegetarian and being an animal lover and all of this stuff, and she exposes her to everyone with a PowerPoint presentation. It's hilarious and savage at the same time, but it's a great example of an obliger rebellion. She just has enough and she snaps.
Yeah, which is totally fair. So, I guess I've also heard obligers say, I feel like people just keep taking, taking. They don't want to spend time with me. They always, we only get in touch they only get in touch with us when they want something.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's like
probably a good sign that there might be like a rebellion coming.
And also a good warning for other people who have obligers in their life to not take advantage of them, because they do have a breaking point, and it's quite hard for obligers to push back themselves. And I can definitely speak to an upholder quirk, because I feel like people hear what upholders can do, and it sounds like the dream tendency.
It really does, doesn't it?
Especially to obligers, I think. I think obligers will hear that upholders can just do whatever they want whenever they want without hurting other people, and they think, wow, this sounds amazing. But the problem with being an upholder is you can get too rigid. You can get so stuck in your ways that you become inflexible and that you can't bend when you need to bend. And I've definitely had that in my life, where I get so stuck into a routine, so stuck into a pattern, so stuck into probably less like thoughts, because like my values shift happily with different information, but definitely into like behaviors, that it's very hard for me to change those behaviors. So that's definitely a huge downside of being an upholder. And also that you can be a little bit critical of other people if they're not doing things
How
because
you
yeah, because you don't understand why.
yes.
You know, like, again, classic example is me being like, why on earth do people say they want to go to the gym and then not go to the gym? It's not that hard, but it is hard for everybody else.
Yeah.
It's just not hard for me.
Yeah.
And then rebels, I don't know if there's any specific quirks with them that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, they're a pretty quirky personality, as is.
I guess kind of like the whole reverse psychology works quite well for them.
Yeah, which is interesting because, like, you don't want to be manipulative of rebels in your life, but you do kind of have to be creative with how you communicate with rebels, because if you try and communicate with them in a way that you'd communicate with everyone else, and again, anyone who has rebels in their lives knows that this is true, it's not going to work.
Yeah. So, shall we move on to relationships? So, normally with these tendencies, you generally, what you'll find is that rebels get with obligers, and upholders get with questioners.
Not always, by the way. This isn't set rules. Again, these are just things that Gretchen Rubin's observed.
General observations.
Yes. Like, I think she did interview someone once where it was a rebel and an upholder as a couple, but I can definitely say as a upholder that would probably be quite a hard relationship to make work. I mean, you've got one person who wants to put things on the calendar and one person who has zero interest in putting things on the calendar. So you're going to butt heads at even the simplest stuff. But I find it really interesting that rebels and obligers like to be together. And it's because they balance each other out, which makes sense if you think about the obliger rebellion we were talking about before.
So why do they balance each other out?
Well, because a rebel partner is going to stop an obliger just obliging for no reason. They're going to push back at them if they do something just to people please, or just because someone else wants them to, and say, but why are you doing it?
So
you actually want to do it?
So I guess it's questioning their value, is it?
Yeah, questioning their values, or questioning them on their values so that they can reflect on their values and make sure that what they're doing actually meets their values, and they're not just doing it to oblige, which is kind of what they naturally do. And then on the flip side, I think obligers handle the rebel tendency the most because they're comfortable meeting other people's expectations, so they can balance out the rebel the most easily, whereas a rebel and an upholder, for example, are more likely to clash.
And then what about the upholder and the questioner?
I guess that kind of naturally makes sense because there is the overlap in the sense that we both like to meet our own inner expectations. I mean, that's definitely true for me and you. Like, you know, we both have a long day at work, we come home. For me, recharging means sitting down, reading a book, watching a movie, whatever. For you, recharging means gaming, / talking to your friends. And neither of us takes it personally because we understand that we each need to meet our own inner expectations.
I was going to say it isn't something to do with like the questioner making the upholder being less rigid. I was going to say, like, you know, because you're throwing stats at them, you're like, you know, I'm going to the gym after work, and you're like, yeah, but we've got A, B, C, D, E, like, are you sure this is something we should be doing?
It might be, yeah.
Is that kind of part of it?
It might be. I mean, I think the questioner upholder pairing isn't one that Gretchen has like obviously noticed. Not the way that the rebel obliger one she's noticed. So I've never heard her mention anything like that, but that makes sense. And I feel like I should say the reason I know so much about this is because I've been listening to Gretchen's podcast Happier since like 2018, 2017, maybe even earlier, like a long, long, long time. And she talks about this pretty regularly with her sister, who's an obliger, and then her husband's a questioner. So that's why I know so much about it. I think I've read the book too, the Four Tendencies book. It's not, I didn't study any of this. Again, this is just how my upholder brain works. I can just like spew out these facts, which, well, actually, to be fair, that's probably less upholder brain and more slightly questioner brain. I find this stuff interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, okay, well, that's quite interesting. Anything else? Any other takeaways from this?
I don't think so. But I think we've already kind of said the main thing that I really like to remember when thinking about the tendencies, which is, yeah, you don't want to hate on yourself for your tendency. You'd want to learn to work with it, and it is helpful to know because it makes you more empathetic of yourself and the way you work, and it helps you to give yourself grace, but it also helps you to give other people grace and get less frustrated and not take things personally. Like when I ask you a question and you immediately don't like answering me, or you question everything I do, I don't take it personally because I know you're not just trying to push back at me or be disrespectful of me or that you don't trust my opinion. It's just the way your brain works.
Yeah.
You want to understand it. And probably the other thing that I would say that Gretchen also emphasizes is this is a very small part of your personality, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
obviously not all upholders are the same, not all questioners and obligers and rebels are the same. But yeah, is there anything else you wanted to say?
Cool, yeah, so maybe a quick summary.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So tendency number 1 is obliger, which is the biggest category.
Yep.
They meet outer expectation. So they will go for a run if someone wants to go for a run with them, but they don't meet inner expectation, so they won't go for a run if they decide they want to go for a run.
Yep. Next.
Then there's questioners who meet inner expectation but not outer expectation. So they will go for a run if they've read the data that says running is good for you. They're not going to go for a run if someone else wants them to, but they don't want to.
Yep.
And then upholders who meet inner and outer expectation. So they'll go for the run if a buddy wants to go with them, but they'll also go for a run just because they want to and they've decided it's something they want to do.
Yep.
And then rebels who don't meet inner or outer expectation, and they will go for a run spontaneously because they feel like it, and it's what they want to do. They're probably pretty unlikely to go for a run just because someone else wants to go a run with them, unless it's a value for them to not let other people down, and then they might convince themselves to go for a run with a run buddy.
Cool. And then, yeah, like we're saying, everything else is in the actual episode. So
Yeah.
I think that's the main takeaway. So basically, the whole concept of this was to understand the tendencies and be able to apply it to your day to day. So that if you know anyone like this, that, you know, you might struggle with one personality or another, at least then you kind of have some tools.
100%. And also, we'll probably refer to this because I feel like we refer to this in our day-to-day chats.
I was going to say in your eating disorder, how many times have you said upholder?
Oh, did I? I
Yeah,
don't. Yeah,
probably quite a lot.
Well, there you go. Yeah, there you go. So it makes a bit more sense now that people understand what an upholder actually is.
Yeah, so, yeah, nice and straightforward. A good little episode, a good little, you know, reference episode, a good little tool to have in the back pocket. Have you got anything else you want to do?
Oh, we're supposed to do the gratitudes.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I forgot about that. And then that's basically it, I guess. So, all gratitudes. I went to see my nurse practitioner this morning and I was quite nervous about it, which is ironic because I'm a healthcare professional. So I know how to advocate for myself, but it's still hard when you're the patient. And yeah, it was a very successful appointment. I achieved the things that I needed to and I felt heard, which was good. We went to the gym. And I gave Ted a pat and his head was really soft. Ted's our dog, by the way, which I think we've mentioned before. What about you?
For me, I would say we got the groceries done, which was good, so that's something off the checklist. Again, we did a walk with Ted as well. A lot of Ted-orientated stuff today. And what would be the last one? Had a sauna after the gym, so that was quite nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's me.
Cool. I think that's us.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for listening in. Next time, we're not too sure what we're going to be talking about. We've got a few episodes lined up, so we'll just see how we go.
Alrighty. Bye.
All right. See ya.